Hello and welcome to Wide Angle This Week. Data security, the spread of fake news and misinformation online have been topical for the last few years now, but this week particularly so when a huge scandal has broken in the United Kingdom. A political consulting firm named Cambridge Analytica harvested the profiles and user information of over 50 million Facebook users and used that for political campaigning. Here in India, there have, of course, been very strong reactions as reports come out of how Cambridge Analytica has been trying to woo both the BJP and the Congress for further election campaigning in India. But I think the issue of fake news and misinformation is something that's been so pressing for most of us in the Indian media as well. To talk about this, we have with us Pratik Sinha, who founded Alt News. Now, let's not forget Alt News, which is now a year and 1 month old today, came out as somebody who has been checking, making us as mainstream media constantly ensure that we're doing our jobs correctly as well, and calling out news for what it is online. Pratik Sinha, thanks so much for being on the show this week. You started a year ago. What was your motivation to start something called Alt News? You're not mainstream media, and with so much out there, many people say, how do we know what you're telling us is true or not?
So we started essentially because we have been on social media for a long time, and what we observed was there was increased amount of misinformation / disinformation on social media. That was one of the trends that we saw. Another trend that we saw, because I walked 10 days from Ahmedabad to Una, I'm also part of a civil liberties organization called Jansangarsh Manch, and I run a page called Truth of Gujarat. So via Truth of Gujarat, I documented the entire walk from Ahmedabad to Una for 10 days, and there was very little attention from mainstream media till the time it became really big. So, I also had a grudge that, mainstream media doesn't cover people's movements enough, especially, I have been part of Jansangarsh Manch, and the sister organizations have been part of many mainstream, many people's movements, but they have not been covered. So we wanted to cover these two issues, but, covering people's movements needs money, that kind of reportage needs money, and we did not have that. So we started off with fake news, hoping that we can, expand our ambit as and when we have money. Yeah.
So you started off with fake news. In fact, when you go onto the Alt News website, there's just one tiny paragraph that says what you're all about, and it really is about busting propaganda and the spread of fake news, particularly on social media. We're seeing this scandal erupt globally right now with Cambridge Analytica and what's happened with the harvesting of user information. We talk about data security over here as well. What are your views on that scandal? How does what you do kind of tie in with what's being exposed by The Guardian in the United Kingdom right now?
So, what had happened in this case, it's important to tell the audience that what had happened was there's this one researcher who created an app back in 2013, 2014, when Facebook had very permissive, their apps could access a lot of data.
Right.
2015, they changed the permission structure, and now any apps that are created post 2015 do not have that kind of access. The data that was collected back then was handed over to Cambridge, and then Cambridge Analytica, and then they used that for the purpose that they did. Now what Facebook is doing is that they are looking at all the apps that were created back then, which probably, this was probably not the only app. There are multiple apps created back then. This was a personality quiz.
And all those addictive personality quizzes, I was just going to say. Yeah.
Yes, this was a personality quiz. So I'm sure there were many other apps created back then. And, because I have been a software engineer, a lot of developers, they want to collect as much data as possible, not always with a malicious intention, but just, the data is available, why not collect it? Because at the end of the day, data becomes the intellectual property for a lot of these companies, who are working, they can sell data. And at that point of time, it was not looked down upon, because Facebook was letting you collect the data.
Right.
So it was Facebook's responsibility. So having, in that scenario, I think, at least from the global perspective, I'm sure there were many other apps which did the same. We won't know till Facebook actually does an entire audit of all the apps that were prevalent at that point of time and what data it collected. And at that point in time, even in the Indian political ecosystem, there were many such apps that were there, and that data still exists somewhere out there, and we don't know who's using that data.
So that data is what was then used to create targeted campaigns that helped. In the case of Cambridge Analytica and the Facebook controversy, the US President Donald Trump win his election by their own admission and what we've seen. What are the concerns in India? Because as you said, there's a lot of data out there, whether it's, from which city would you live in, to what color are you, to what 80s pop song are you, all kinds of things. What's happening with this information in the Indian context?
So, no, that is a matter of investigation. I mean, yesterday, on various news channels, Congress kept telling BJP that you're using it. BJP kept telling Congress that you're using it. And then in the middle of this is that Ovleno or whatever that company, which is a subsidiary of
Cambridge Analytica
right, in India. Now it's a matter of, investigation as to what data they have. Probably at this point of time, they've already scrubbed all the data. If they had any data, they already scrubbed it off their servers. But data analytics and usage of machine learning and neural networks, etc. You can do a lot of things. It is impossible even to figure out just looking at data, because there are a lot of data scientists out there who look at data in a variety of ways, and how they might use it and how they might target the audience is difficult to say. I'm not. My specialty was never, even though I've been a software engineer, my specialty was never data or big data. So, but that's a difficult question to answer as to what they're doing with this data at this point in time.
So, apart from the existence of this data, we have, in terms of targeting audiences or targeting users and spreading misinformation, there are a number of websites around the country as well that have popped up. There's constantly news that seems so outrageous out there, but it gets traction. I mean, somebody puts something on Twitter. That's one part of what you do at Alt News. Another part is when you call out, mass tweets and say how everybody tweeted the same kind of line, or a propaganda story that may have actually had some other messaging. How do you find these stories? How do you've got to be alert and awake 24/7 to be able to actually pick up what's going on, because the volume of traffic on social media is so intense.
So we prioritize our stories. We only do probably 5% of the stories that are out there on a daily basis. For example, just in the last 2-3 days, we've been putting out fake quotes, because that is what we recognize is the new menace. That is, take a picture and then say anything. And in most of these cases, they are targeting the minorities, or sort of supporting a narrative which supports the majoritarian politics. That is the main thing that is
the
being
broad
done.
trend.
Yes. And so instead of now fact checking everything, we just say that this is fake. Normally we don't do that, because that sort of affects the believability of our stories. What we usually do is we pick up the main stories, depending on whether it's a politician saying something which is incorrect, if it's a traditional media house which is saying something incorrect, or if it is a video / image or text out there which has a narrative which is affecting the social fabric of the country, because that is the maximum. And we prioritize those stories, and we put out articles, and we explain exactly how we arrived at our conclusion. That is our usual methodology. You asked as to how should they believe us as to what we are saying is correct or not. And that was the first question that we asked ourselves, as to why would people believe us? And the answer to that is that don't just say that this is fake. For example, when we say that Mr. Harshvardhan, what he said about the mass energy equivalence formula and Vedas having a superior version of that. So we showed exactly how we found out the source of it. We showed that there's no such information on Hawking's website, and that if you use Google search, if you put time filters, the earliest source of this information is a Facebook page, where the handle of the Facebook page is Hari.scientist, while the name is Stephen Hawking. So we take the audience through this entire procedure to show them that it is not that we are just saying that this is fake. This is how you can also go through the same procedure and find out the information. So it is a combination of education, because we also want people to take this up on their own. I mean, simple things like reverse image search. That is the kind of misinformation which is most prevalent. That is, you put out a image, any image, and you put a narrative to it. Now, how does somebody who has a 9-to-5 job quickly find out whether this information is true or not? So go to reverse.photos on your phone, click on upload image, upload the image, click on time filter, look for the information, see what narrative it was probably originally pushed out as. So, that kind of education which will let users...
Which ordinary users don't have, I mean...
They don't have. So, problem is that, we might be critical towards our own professions. I am a software engineer, so I'm probably critical towards the work I'm doing. A farmer would be critical towards the things that is happening in his field. But a lot of people are not critical enough towards the information that they receive on social media. And criticality can be developed only via education. That is how all of us have become critical, because we have received certain kind of education, not always school education, but education even from the family perspective. Let's say a business family, somebody is in diamond business, they know how to do. They may not even have passed the fifth grade, but they are critical enough towards their business. So that kind of criticality. So
Pratik, this brings me to two questions, because one, you've said the user needs to also understand and learn. It's critical for them to access certain sites or understand how data is used or images and news spreads on the internet. But in the West in particular, and we're seeing this happen here as well, everyone talks about, your truth versus mine. And then we have the US president, no less, rubbish mainstream media as fake news. That's something we're seeing happen over here as well, that if there is a prominent news story in a prominent publication or a television channel or whatever have you, inevitably somebody who disagrees with that will turn around and call it fake news. So it's also a term that's being used and abused. So does that impact the importance of what you're doing sometimes when it's trivialized like this?
The US situation is not directly impacting the Indian situation. In Indian situation, fake news is clearly demarcated, number one, as the kind that is floating around on social media. Okay, so it is in case of US, the president is actually attacking mainstream media organizations like the New York Times or CNN. So they are, and then he recently had these awards of the most fake articles or journalists or something to that effect. So that is a different category. Here we are dealing with a different situation where people, in the US, for example, they still haven't got onto the WhatsApp bandwagon, because they still use SMS more than WhatsApp. Here, because WhatsApp is free, and anything that is free, because of the economic conditions of the country, especially as you go into rural areas where there's more and more poverty, anything that is free is lapped up. And WhatsApp is free. SMS you have to pay whatever, 50 paisa or 1 rupee or whatever.
Right, exactly.
So and there's a very small technological barrier to go from SMS to WhatsApp as opposed to going from SMS to Facebook or Twitter. Okay, so people have got onto the WhatsApp bandwagon, and now
it's easy to understand.
Yes, and now what is happening is that you'll constantly hear, "Kahan padha tha aapne?" WhatsApp pe padha tha. So WhatsApp has become a trusted source of information. It is like a newspaper. Those who are reading newspapers and considering everything that comes in a newspaper as gospel truth, they have got onto WhatsApp, and they think that whatever comes on WhatsApp is truth. And there's no exaggeration in this. They do think, they find it incredulous to believe that something that has come on WhatsApp could be false.
So that actually kind of brings us back. It loops the circle, because WhatsApp now is a Facebook property. There's no way. With Facebook, they're looking at user profiles and these 50 million users, etc. In India, as you said, the technological barrier from SMS to WhatsApp is much smaller than compared to SMS to Twitter and Facebook, because you require email addresses, you require all those other layers to go through them.
And the look and feel is also similar.
Look and feel is also similar, right? So when you have this information about all of us out in the ether, in the Indian context, is WhatsApp going to be able to also access some of that information because they're a Facebook property? Or, I mean, are those concerns now
So
arising?
WhatsApp, if you remember, when WhatsApp enabled end-to-end encryption, there was also a checkbox,
Right.
which now by default is unchecked. But at that point of time, initially it was by default checked, where they were collecting some sort of information. I can't remember exactly.
Yes.
But now by default it is unchecked. The new installations of WhatsApp, they have it unchecked. But WhatsApp and Facebook are slightly different. See, the kind of data that is collected on Facebook, in the US context, for example, they were targeting using Facebook advertisement. In Facebook advertisement, you can create an audience. If you ever go through that Facebook advertising thing, you can create an audience, and to create that audience, you can give it some seed information. So, your question was how are they using this data?
Yeah.
So you give that seed information, you create an audience, and then you have targeted advertisement. Facebook creates that audience for you based on the seed information. You don't have to do anything. Okay,
Right.
so Facebook has given that mechanism. Now, in case of Facebook, Facebook does have a reach in India, but not as much as WhatsApp.
Right.
In the WhatsApp world, that is not possible. You can't target, especially because WhatsApp is not an open network. WhatsApp is a peer-to-peer network. If I
have to have a number, you have to have a number,
yes,
and we connect with
each other. While Facebook is not so. Facebook, you see all these kinds of ads where you'll see that your friend has liked something. There's something sponsored and your friend has liked it. So you'll see that, and it mines data and things like that. WhatsApp is still not into the advertisement. There's no advertisement on WhatsApp. So even if they claim that they are not collecting data, especially if that checkbox is not collected. So I don't see that kind of danger, at least with WhatsApp. With Facebook, especially from the US perspective, with so many people on Facebook, it was easier for them to target the US citizens with targeted Facebook advertisement.
So that also brings me to the next question, which is that when you're targeting fake news on social media, even you are sort of in a sense restricted to the users who will read your articles on Twitter, on Facebook, or subscribe to your mailing list, as the case may be. How are you taking on WhatsApp?
So that is the challenge, right? That is the biggest challenge, especially in the WhatsApp world, that let's say if there's some misinformation, and there's a lot of regional misinformation, it need not always be of the national scale,
It's very local.
Yeah, it is very local.
Yeah.
And we find that out about 5 days later. It could be something as simple as that there are new job openings, which is untrue. New job openings in a local district collectorate, and which is untrue. Somebody has put that out, and it is untrue. We find that out later. Now, that is not something which is harmful as such. It is, but there is that kind of information. Now, there's no way to get back into that ecosystem and tell them, no, this is not true, because that information is going through a peer-to-peer network, and you cannot. There's no technology which will let you tell that section of population that this is wrong. So that is a challenge, and that is a challenge which will always be there. Because we also need WhatsApp, we also need tools which give you end-to-end privacy, especially with increased monitoring and snooping from government. We need that kind of thing. So the only way to counter it is, I believe, educational reform right from school level to college level and beyond.
And also, it's a very fine line, and it's a challenging one, because all of us who are advocates of free speech are now being confronted by the dark side of free speech, because free speech also leads to this. So, when I'm asked, for example, do you believe in regulation or do you believe in censorship, my instinctive answer is no, of course I don't. As a journalist, I don't believe in this. But do I believe in the spread of fake news? No, of course not. So what's the answer in between?
So at least from the Facebook, we have met these platforms multiple times, and at least from their perspective, it is twofold. One, yes, we should not let, let's say, Facebook or Twitter or any of these organizations control what people publish on their platforms, in the sense what they put out. But there has to be a regulation in terms of once something is deemed to be fake and completely fake, not things like, UNESCO has declared Indian anthem as the best national anthem. That does not matter. Let people say that is not going to create any trouble. But something that is
that could incite violence,
that is illegal according to the laws of the country. because they as a corporate body have to follow the laws of the country.
Okay.
And something which is deemed illegal, whether it is hate speech and things like that, those they have to take care of and take them down. So just follow the law of the country, and most countries say that such kind of hate speech is not allowed.
Well, in the case of fake news, Facebook recently said that they had several thousands of people identifying political material particularly, and then if it comes onto my page, for example, and I click on a link, I'll get a warning saying somebody from Facebook has considered that this could be fake news, but it's not been taken down, it's just there. I don't
They
know.
don't have a mechanism to take it down yet. So, okay, so second thing that they're doing, okay, so first thing that they're doing is that they will eventually have a mechanism to at least downrank it or take it down once it is flagged. They don't have it yet. And the second thing that they do is, they are trying to puncture the bubble. One big problem on social media is that we are living in a bubble, an ideological bubble. We only follow, what adheres to our ideology.
Yeah.
Yes. So what they will start doing is, what I have been told is, let's say you're reading an article from Swarajya. So then you'll get other viewpoints in related articles. And even from the Google point of view, what they are doing is they have created something called a meta tag, in the sense that you embed that code inside your article. So let's say Trump has made a claim, and if you are fact checking it and you say that he is false, this is a link to his claim and this is what I'm saying, this is a specific meta tag, and so then Google will index that, and then below Trump's article you'll very often see articles from PolitiFact, for example, because they are saying that we are fact checking this, and this is the alternative version.
So it's related to whatever
yes.
you're seeing.
So what the platforms are doing is, instead of regulating, trying and giving more, so this is an opinion, countering it. So
right.
Essentially giving increased opportunities for counter speech.
Because I think we're now in this world of social media. It's too late to kind of walk back from it, even for all of us who are questioning what's going on. We're very actively involved in this space. So counter speech is basically what you're saying is essentially the way forward as well. But on another note, Pratik, alt news began as something small and independent. How do you keep it together? And what about any threats that you may receive when people don't necessarily like the work that you're doing? How do you deal with those situations?
So the only real threat was, got a call sometime in March 2017 ki likhna band kar denge to goli maar denge. So that was one. Well, we filed a police complaint, but I think because I also belong to an organization, we have done work which has been much more. We have dealt with all the fake encounters in Gujarat and things like that. All the 4 fake encounters, all they are clients of Jansanghashman. So we have, anti-establishment work is not something that is new. So we have an organizational support, and that gives you a sense of security that there are lawyers, activists, etc., who will back you up eventually. But other than that, the kind of hate that you get on social media, you just ignore it.
You ignore it.
Yes.
And it's enough to keep you going, and it's sort of it's a purpose. It's almost like it's a purpose. It's much more than just work for you.
Yes, because we do believe that the belief is that in a democracy, when people go to the voting booth to give a vote, they should make an informed decision. At this point in India, I don't think our democracy has matured enough that people make informed decisions. They do not consider enough viewpoints when they give a vote.
Right.
So the aim is to sort of give enough information, the information that they're not receiving yet, so that eventually they don't sort of make they don't just make a voting choice because there's so much anti-minority hate out there, because a lot of people,
or somebody has swayed them with a sop, as the case may be.
Exactly, yeah. So that is the eventual aim, that to be educational, to help people become more critical about the information they receive, how they perceive it, and how they process it to make decisions in their day-to-day life.
And really critical for the safety of democracy and democratic principles as well. Right. Pratik Sinha, I'm sure that you'll have many more subscribers and followers as we run up to the next election campaign as well. Thank you so much for speaking to Wide Angle today. Thanks so much.
The belief is that in a democracy, when people go to the voting booth to give a vote, they should make an informed decision. At this point in India, I don't think, you know, our democracy has matured enough that people make informed decisions. You know, they do not consider enough viewpoints, you know, when they give a vote.
Right.
So the aim is to, you know, sort of give enough information, the information that they're not receiving yet, so that eventually, you know, they don't sort of make, you know, they don't just make a voting choice because there's so much anti-minority hate out there, because a lot of people,
Or somebody has swayed them with a sop, as the case may be.
exactly, yeah. So that is the eventual aim, that, you know, to be educational, to help people become more critical about the information they receive, how they perceive it, and how they process it to make decisions in their day-to-day life.
And really critical for the safety of democracy and democratic principles as well. Pratik Sinha, I'm sure that you'll have many more subscribers and followers as we run up to the next election campaign as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for speaking to Wide Angle
Thank
today.
you.
Thanks so much.